have a lot of corporate competence on the stage here now. And we are talking about sustainability. Sustainability, which is really one key aspect in Paris these next 2 weeks, no doubt. If I can start with you, Jacob, long-termness is something that when we come from the environmental and sustainability, it implies long-term. How is that going in the corporate sector? I mean, you represent a family which have been engaged in companies for a very long time. Is it important with long-term ownership also in order to build a long-term sustainability in the corporate sector?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here, and I think at the end of the day, the whole question of sustainability is, of course, one of a question of long-term attitude. It's a question of long-term attitude to the environment, but if you look at the definition of the UN Global Compact, then of course it's much broader. It's the relationship with society at large that is just as important, human rights, labor rights, etc. I think in order to work with those issues, it is very, very difficult to do it in the short term. To deliver on one hand a great result of a company in the short term, and on the other hand deal with what I think are fundamentally long-term issues. So of course, from my personal point of view and perspective, to chair a company whose lead words are to be a long-term shareholder and to be an engaged shareholder at that, it's very helpful thinking sustainability, thinking about these issues. And to us, that is really important today. All the companies where we are the lead shareholder are today members of the UN Global Compact, as is Investor since all of 1 year. You have to wake up sometime and deal with these things, right?
But the Global Compact finally caught up with you. That's
probably.
Yeah.
No, in all fairness, we were engaged in other areas, yeah. But we eventually thought that UN Global Compact was the one that best represented us, and those thoughts are the ones we support. But all the companies where we are long-term shareholders are members of the UN Global Compact. So the question is really not so much about the issue as such. It's more a matter of how do you move forward? How do you make these companies actually apply the principles of the UN Global Compact, or what's their attitude, and what can we do as responsible shareholders to support that development?
What are the barriers? I mean, this is a quite interesting perspective. As you're saying, we have to get the companies to really adopt and work with these principles, for instance. What are the barriers in companies in order to get them there? Is it still the short-term gains versus long-term? What are the barriers?
It's part of it. It is a continuous challenge for any company to on one hand work with cutting costs and so on, and on the other hand having to undertake costs to take that long-term attitude to sustainability. But I think what is so important and what I feel is that you cannot work with clients, you cannot work with your employees if you do not have a sustainable agenda. It is a prerequisite. Ask Nike, that were accused of having child labor 20 years ago, or ask Shell, that tried to sink an oil rig south of Africa 20 years ago. Both those companies were on the verge of going under as a consequence of the reaction of the consumer. I think we're all acutely aware of that. The relationship with the consumer, the relationship with society is absolutely fundamental. So I don't have a problem talking to my colleagues in different companies with that from that point of view. To the contrary, I think we all agree. Then it's details. How do you do it? Where do you spend a bit extra, etc., etc. That's part of day-to-day work. Can I?
Sure.
Oh, sorry. I just had to say one thing about day-to-day work. There was a suggestion in the earlier panel that banking was on its way to die, and I just wanted to underline that the rumor of our death is slightly too early.
That's good to hear that. I think it's going to be a nice dinner conversation. We have a few people we should put together, I think, in a small group. That's nice to hear. But you're right. I mean, it's interesting, however, as you say, a lot of companies are changing today, and they take on sustainability as a natural thing. But at the same time, we do see challenges still. If we take Volkswagen as an example that came up also. Now you are not an owner of Volkswagen, but what do you think makes a difference between when a company really makes sure that it's part of its fundamental structure, sustainability, and when it becomes more of a sort of communication aspect? What do you need to do?
I agree. That is, I'm sure, a challenge. We're all human beings. But as I said, I think really in today's society, it's not a real issue. In most companies, you've passed that point. However, there will always be individuals and parts of organizations that try to cut corners. They are also human beings. That is just the way it is. And I think it's down to the regulators, to watchdogs, whatnot, to be on top of us. And then it's up to shareholders to put demands to boards of companies and to the leadership of companies. And I think that is exactly what we're seeing in today's day and world, in a very transparent world where, if nothing else, media will scrutinize us every day, and the consumer will follow that.
If I can move to you, Steve, IKEA, the IKEA group, also tries to have, or has a high profile in terms of sustainability. And I think that you have invested in something that you now call the climate actions. So that's one aspect. But you also are stating that you try to make, and this is actually an important issue, it makes it easier for your consumers or your customers to become more sustainable. Because that's what a lot of people are asking, what can I do? You reach millions of people out there. What is it that you can do as a company to increase sustainability through your customers?
It's a great question. I'll come to it. I just want to say, I think we're at an interesting point where actually sustainability is just mainstreaming now. It needs to. And Johan's going to talk about the planetary boundaries. Now we've gone from resource scarcity, climate change are a reality. Much more transparency is a real issue. But I think a lot of the business community is still a bit asleep on the issue. We shouldn't be too complacent about this. And we need a strong voice from civil society, from the media, to apply a pressure on business. But some businesses are starting to unlock innovation and see sustainability as something that's going to drive change and development in their businesses. So we looked at it in three ways. We said, it is about the people that participate in our value chain. It's about our operations to make them completely sustainable, energy and resource independent. And then we're about life at home furnishings as a business. So we can help actually bring sustainability and make it affordable, attractive and accessible for people. And then it's regular everyday things. So it's, why does a waste bin have to be ugly? Why can't you have beautiful recycling opportunities? Can you make every tap a water-saving tap? One of the things we did quite significantly, and we'll talk more about it, you can actually see on the Champs-Élysées some renewably energy-powered LEDs on the Champs-Élysées at the moment. We like LEDs. They last on average more than 20 years. They save 85% of the energy. It genuinely is the next best thing to daylight. So 4 years ago, we said, how fast can we eliminate all the other light bulbs from our business and only sell LEDs? And we said we'd do it by the 1st of September this year. We did it by the 1st of September this year. It was a huge re-engineering of our value chain to do that. But the customers have responded because they get it now. They realize the value proposition of the product is great. So that's what we can do. It's about driving innovation with purpose, and it's not about having a premium range of sustainability for the people that can afford it. It's about making it affordable for everyone.
In that transition, I mean, as you say, I mean, certain processes you drive very fast. Where do you see the barriers? Are they regulatory barriers, or what are the barriers for being a fast mover in this sector, as you have been?
On some things, the barriers are only the ones you choose to put in front of yourselves. So, as a business, I talk about, there's some simple rules you can put in place for yourself. So I talk a lot about going all in, the rule of 100%. So if you say we're going to go 100% for something like we did with LEDs, then that means you stop all other investment activities on everything else. If you set a target for a business which is 50%, then 50% of the people will be thoroughly confused. You don't know what success looks like. If you set a target of 90%, more than 10% of your business wants to be in the remaining 10%. So when you go for total targets, total transformation, then actually people say, we know what success looks like. So whether that's on going for bioplastics and recycling, or 100% FSC wood, or 100% LEDs, that's the first rule. The other is make it better. Sustainability, the first misadventure into, say, sustainability was to have things like detergents that washed your whites grayer. That I can go on. There is a long list. And we were saying sustainability is about compromise. Who here would really like lots of compromise? A slightly worse life tomorrow? No hands up. So it's about making things better. That's why it is LEDs or induction hobs or electric vehicles, things that are fundamentally better for people. And then you have to get your whole business to stand behind those things. And what we need to go further and faster is we do need, and this is about COP21, is to say this is a time for governments to also to be clear, and let's have long, loud and legal policy. And just one last point on that. It's been interesting. We've rolled out renewable energy around the world. I think we've got 23 wind farms today. I won't count the one wind turbine that's up temporarily on the Champs-Élysées as one. And we've installed nearly 800,000 solar panels around the world. But we've had, let's say they're not quite shovel-ready, but they're electrician-ready projects, engineer-ready projects, ready to go, when because of choppy changes in policy, we've had to actually stop them. So governments need to realize this is about industrial innovation, it's about job creation, it's about green growth, and we need to actually have really good, carefully thought through policy. It's not luxury incentives, but it's good long-term policy making. And policymakers tend to look over their shoulder at technology and say, okay, solar costs this much, so we think it can take this much share of the economy. Well, actually, in the last 40 years, it's gone down 99% solar. In the last 5 years, it's gone down nearly 80%. So the future looks very, very different from the past, and you have to set policy towards the future.
Very nice. And just if you can respond really very short, because again, you are also a sort of family-owned company, a long-term investment. Have you ever had to compromise in this process between profits and sustainability in the short term?
I've always said you can always have make a business case to do the right thing. So if you can construct a business case to do the right thing, why would you possibly do anything else?
Good, thank you. Jean-Louis, moving towards another agenda. We quite often talk about smart cities, and I know this is something that you are also very interested in, Jakob. But also in Europe, we are really discussing how we can get our energy systems to be more efficient. And I know this is something that you have been looking into, and some of the other panelists as well. We heard a practical example how you can really move the agenda forward. But we need more coordination. We talk about European competitiveness. Maybe can you give some insights in that energy transition and what you think we need to do in Europe?
Thank you. Yes, I'm very pleased to address this point, which could be really what is happening in relation with sustainability, of course, of the change of the transition in energy, which I think is a very important thing presently happening. Just one word about what has been before. Before, basically, a common European energy policy has been a failure, and there has been, as many other fields, a big divergence in the policies of the different European states. Let me just explain a few points. The basic idea of the European Commission at the beginning was what was important. Important was, of course, the environment and competition. I just can give you an example. Saint-Gobain, the previous company I ran, was one of the big consumer of electricity in France. When did we have our best price? When we had the Électricité de France monopoly. When we get the European type competition, we only had a much worse price.
Okay.
Because the advantage of having a low cost of energy due to the nuclear program of France was in fact taken by the producer and not given to the consumer. So that's point one. Point two, there is a total difference of approach between Germany and France. Give you also an example. In France, the public pays its electricity half the price of Germany. Half the price. For the big companies who are using a lot of electricity, it is the same price. Because when a country has to make a choice between its consumer and producer, the French always advantage the consumer, and the Germans always advantage the producer. And that is basic to the divergence of an energy policy. And I think that's a very important point. Now, what is the big change? When you are, let's say first one, the big question is, what about nuclear energy? You clearly have two countries, France and, a bit perhaps surprisingly at the beginning, the United Kingdom is at least publicly saying they are going to have a big nuclear energy program. All the other European countries, or many of them, have said, no, we are going to keep our program, don't build new plants, and perhaps even with the time, close the nuclear plants. So big divergence on one very important item. Number two, it is absolutely clear that there is a big change. I am a vice chairman of ENGIE, one of our largest French energy company. What is the change? We have been in the past investing in big plants, a lot of connections, costly connections, and we have been, of course, having plants in coal, gas, and also, of course, sometimes even fuel oil from oil. Now, what is the new thing? These products have been heavy in investment. Prices have been extremely fluctuating. So the profitability has been shaky, at least. So companies now are really going very differently. First, they are going to invest heavily in the planet, but also in Europe, in renewable. What is left, of course, of hydraulic, biomass, wind, and solar. Because, of course, in some of those fields, let's say just the wind and solar especially, prices are really strongly declining. Number two, and they get usually contracts with fixed price. No challenges about a fluctuating price on the market like you have it on oil or even on electricity on spot. No, number two, they are going heavily in the service to consumers. Service to business, service to territories, the towns, service even to the end consumer. This is a much more stable business. And that means that what's going to happen to the big investments? It's going to be a completely change. There will be automatically significant potential write-offs in many companies. We are seeing them at each time recent accounts. And this is being a very big change. We are going to more green energy. We are going to more stability in price. We are going to be much more service-oriented. In fact, for a town in connection with what is done in water and everything. So, to summarize it, there'll be extremely big change. What is left, finally, for Europe? Interconnections, which is needed. Safety, because we cannot depend too much on one country. And to finish, we need a CO2 price. If there is not a CO2 price, which is clear for long-term decision by companies, we are not going to have a European policy. Is that here today? Not yet. We need it soon.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Can I test the panel? Would you agree we need a CO2 tax? And in what way? Is it global, or what would you say? Do we agree in the panel, Jacob?
No, I certainly agree. We need a CO2 tax. I think the principle is you have to put a price on things in order for companies to deal with it in a logical, rational way. But it is absolutely fundamental that you have this price across the globe. It has to be a level playing field, or companies will just vote with their feet and move to the lowest cost place if they can.
But is that going well with what you talked about before, saying that, I mean, sustainability is actually, a must. You can demonstrate also by profits that it's actually, it's competitive. If we take Sweden, for instance, we've had the highest CO2 tax in the world for a long time, and companies have not left, or not all of them at least.
They have dealt with the issue, but I think I'm talking from a point of principle. And there will always be companies that, as I said, cutting corners, thinking more short term, what have you. And in order to avoid that, I think you need this level playing field across the world. We know that by experience. I can only stand for my own value base. There are a lot of other value bases.
Okay. Steve, I mean, you are really on a global arena. Well, how do you see a CO2 tax, and how important is this for your business?
When we've looked at it, and because we make long-term investment decisions, so we'll invest in something that has a 7 or 8 year payback. Lots of businesses are looking at 3-year payback or less for internal investments in things like energy efficiency. So for us, we're already acting anyway without the carbon pricing. But more widely, it would be fantastic to have a really strong price signal all the way around the world. It would be fantastic. I think it's politically we're not going to get there. What we'll have is much more carbon pricing in different places. And I think it's really important, but there are other tools in the toolbox, the sort of incentives that you can have for renewables. Banning bad products. We could ban the incandescent light bulb, halogens and CFLs. Ban them. Now there's better alternatives. Stronger fuel efficiency standards for vehicles, these sort of things. So there's lots of tools in addition to carbon pricing, not to say it's not important. The thing we also have to look at is we're going to get better technology. So as you referred to, actually, the price improvements in solar, and I mentioned, is fantastic. So actually, this is a solar century. Every roof is a potential power station, and now solar technology is beginning to get to that point. So everybody's a power company in the future, and that's just fundamentally better. So the sort of things we want, the price incentives and the regulations, are about driving and supporting that technology change. But in the end, it's actually about much better technology. A driverless electric vehicle in 10 years' time will make transport cheap, clean, and affordable, and super convenient for people. So those are the things we need to drive.
Excellent. And mind you, you can tweet this. We have 3 very strong corporate leaders here saying that we need more taxes, we need more regulations, we can ban certain things. What is happening?
I actually stood in Abu Dhabi on a preparation for the COP. I stood up in front of 200 policymakers and said, you can regulate us, you can tax us, you can remove the subsidies on fossil fuels. And then a member of our advisory board reported this back to Peter, my CEO, said, Steve stood up in front of 200 policymakers and said, you can tax us. So I did have to explain the context. But
you're still here, so that's good.
But if you think, it's really clear. If you're in business, you want to have clarity on policy, and then you can make the long-term investment decisions and drive innovation in your business. And it is about those two things together: good policy frameworks and business innovation and investment.
Excellent. Yes, please.
Well, the main point, I think we have to really realize what is the challenges for the energy companies. Their strength was what? They were able to invest heavily in plants, in pipelines, communications, a lot of investment. Today, you may think of everybody having a solution just at his own home. The roof, internally, of course, using an energy system. You have different ways. So it's a complete change for those companies. The big investment, the big world where their competitive advantage was the money, is finished. They have really to go to much more. I mean, and this is of course linked also to the digital changes we have been talking in the previous roundtable. Because if we go to this decentralized situation, internet systems are going to be crucial for those companies. Services, internet. But, well, it will be a big challenge for them.
A big change. And actually, that is actually an interesting question for the panel. I mean, quite often we get the question, okay, but you seem to be very positive about technological changes and so on. This is also a discussion in COP. We will have new technologies that will deal with this. But is it fundamental enough? And more we tend to talk about changes in consumption patterns. We need to really look deeper into what sustainability means. How is that dealt with in your companies? If you take IKEA, for instance, it is a consumer company. Have you made plans for the next 20 years where consumers will buy only half as much?
I think people will buy smarter, and we've certainly looked at, we've really got projects here in France actually on how do you extend the life of products, how can you provide a secondary market so when you're finished with your wardrobe or your sofa, you can resell it. And then designing for recyclability, I think I think we could predict the end of consumerism and be horribly wrong in that prediction. But what we should do is to make consumerism highly sustainable, so based on renewable materials, recyclable materials, breathtakingly efficient clean transport, and renewable energy behind it. And then make sure that circular economy really works well. And I think that's going to drive a lot of innovation there. We've not figured it all out, but we can see lots of opportunities. So I think you can have a sustainable home furnishing business in a busy 21st century that's a completely clean economy. I think you can do that, and most sectors can reinvent themselves like that. Some can't. And if you look at the 20th century, business constantly turned over. There were businesses that were, an example, ice cellars. There were ice cellars. People used to chill food with ice that was cut out of lakes and distributed around the world. When actually the refrigeration came along, they then started to say, actually, but our ice takes a longer time to melt, was one of the defensive strategies. But the natural ice actually went out of business, and refrigeration came in. There's so many examples of things like that. If you think two things are going to drive those changes in the 21st century in a way that will be better for people and the environment, one is digitization and the other is sustainability. And most often those things can work as well. So, the world's biggest taxi company, I don't know if I'm allowed to mention this in Paris actually, the world's biggest taxi company is Uber, and it doesn't own any vehicles. The world's biggest hotel provider of accommodation is Airbnb, that doesn't own a single bedroom. And there's more and more examples of things, these efficiency business models where digitization and sustainability cross over. Okay.
Jakob?
Now, I think this whole discussion focuses on one of the real challenges of COP21. COP21 talks about a 2-degree maximum increase to be achieved over a number of years. And the question is how a number of governments are going to deal with that. But at the end of the day, what governments are doing and sort of their thoughts is sort of semi-hidden in this debate. So we're all now talking about 2 degrees, but we really don't know, nor do we understand how it will affect us as individual consumers, as citizens. I think this is really one of the great challenges, is to make that transition into real life. Not because it's technically so difficult. It's part of R&D, innovation, what have you. But I think the key for COP21 to become reality is an anchoring in the broad society with the citizens of the world, that we accept and that we engage in this whole process. Because right now it's very remote, and there was a survey done in Sweden yesterday, and I think only 25% of the surveyed were even aware of that COP21 took place today, nor did they have a clue what it was all about. That is our real challenge to take the next step.
So more reality connection, that is one thing that is needed.
Well, I just want to stress one point, of course, which my neighbor knows very well, is that the established company, they move quickly, have, of course, some important advantage. Because as you have said previously, changes does not take place immediately. The established company
to lead, and European companies. Okay, you said that the COP feels somehow disconnected a little bit. It's difficult for you as an actor to pull out what is it that we can do now as part of an agreement. In order for the corporate sector to play an even stronger role in our transition to a sustainable society, it sounds vague, I know. What is necessary on a European scale? We had the commissioner here before. What do we need to do in Europe to secure that European companies can actually be at the front run, which is good for the planet, but also, of course, good for business?
I must say, the efficiency will not come from the government. The efficiency will come from the framework the government is going to give to the entrepreneur and the people who change. The change will be done by companies. It's never done by the government. When the government is, in fact, confronted to the problem of changing itself, usually it's the one who's doing it the last one. So basically, I think the important for COP21 is that it's now the company have understood more and better within that framework that they have to change. The best the government can make is make the entrepreneur really active to do things. It will be much more important than any added regulation to reduce the CO2 level or putting things on companies. Let the change come. And that I am a bit optimistic, because I think that COP21 has made the corporate world much more aware in some ways of what was needed to change.
I bet we'll see, I don't know what the rate will be, but let's say it's double the rate of turnover of businesses over the next 20, 30 years that we saw in the previous 20, 30 years. So businesses change, the level of disruption will drive that. And if policymakers need to look at the future that we want, you know, we will have the future. I'm excited about the future. I think we can be the generations in this room represented, if we look at the whole room, that will see us the economy become a clean economy, and to see fair pay much more widely distributed around the world and many other benefits. So we can focus on that future that we want, and we shouldn't try and defend the past at the same time as build the future. So let's not defend the natural ice cellars while we're trying to roll out refrigeration. Let's not secure the coal industry. There's been lots of good people in the coal industry and good companies. It's had its day. It's time to move on. Let's look at the future we want to build. And then we need to have a vision in society. Europe is a marvelous institution, and it seems at the moment, actually, we're, to use an American expression, we're circling our wagons a little bit for understandable reasons. Actually, it's a fantastic part of the world with great businesses, strong, robust civil society, and strong, legitimate democratic governments. We can build a fantastic 21st century, so let's focus on and do it.
Mm-hmm. That I very much agree with. I think some of the key points that crosses my mind, I think the whole issue of long-termism is one that could be encouraged from many quarters. I think the whole question around innovation, research and development is obviously fundamental. It's fundamental that companies make the effort to actually commit capital to do that. Short term, you're not going to be paid off. Long term, there are obvious opportunities. I think the energy agenda is absolutely fundamental, as Jean-Louis pointed to. Europe has to get its act together, and a lot has to happen. The EU has set the direction. It's up to the countries to deliver. One thing crossing my mind, smart cities. It's the whole idea of making more environmental friendly cities, communication, how cars and broad communication is combined. It is how we actually make sure that I mean, in Sweden we have Hammarby Sjöstad, that is an example of how you deal with the environment, how you deal with energy, etc., etc. I think we have to spend a lot more time and effort on the urban areas, because that's where the growth is taking place. Last but not least, talking for corporates, I think it is key that we bring forward good examples. I mean, some of the ones I'm thinking about is Ericsson has committed to decrease total energy consumption in their processes by 30% in 5 years. Atlas Copco is on the Dow Jones, it's considered to be a world leader on sustainability. They're decreasing all their energy consumption by 20%. ABB is educating 3,000 engineers to engage with their suppliers, how they should be energy compliant, etc. These are just some of the real world examples that I think should be communicated and encouraged as we move forward.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be a bit nasty and ask you a final question, and you're going to rank your own business, you could say. And I know that some of you represent more than one company and so on, so you have to think a little bit your sort of group of companies where you have some kind of influence, you could say. From 1 to 10. 10 is we are really sustainable. 1, we are quite awful, to be honest. And it's between there. Today, where do you think you are on that? Or where do you argue that you are? How far do we still have to go in order to be fully sustainable? I know this is a philosophical question. Who knows what that means? But rank your own where you have the influence. What would you say, 1 to 10?
I'll be happy to start. I would say, talking to many of the companies I engage with, I think the line is quite committed. But I think overall, 4 or 5.
4 or 5.
My argument is we've started, but we have a long way to go. And that is just a matter of focus and delivery.
Steve, where are you? IKEA.
I'm torn between confidence and pride and humility.
It's a tough thing there. Yeah, I know.
That's the honest answer. So I'm deeply conflicted.
That's what I was hoping.
Totality, we're probably a 6 out of 10. I'll give you, that's the fairly humble answer. Then I'll quote Ingvar Kamprad, which he says, just because you're the best doesn't mean you're good. So we've still got we've made fantastic progress, but we've still got a long way to go.
Very good. Thank you very much.
I prefer to speak about Saint-Gobain because it's the one I run.
Yes.
I think we're about 6 because Saint-Gobain for a long time has been saving energy in its plants, and basically also because we must also show, as we are providing building materials which are extremely important for saving energy. The products of Saint-Gobain, whether it's glass wool, which we produce proudly in Sweden and in other countries, in Nordic countries, are really products which can be used. We have not spoken a lot about how you have to renovate housing. We forget to say that there will be big constraints on companies, that we all of us reduce our production, but by far away, the way to save energy in the planet is to really save energy in the old houses. And we have all the products. We don't yet have the money, and we don't yet have the commitment. I think this is important. For Saint-Gobain, let's say a number 6.
A number 6. So I think there is a sense of realism in the panel, and you are quite humble, I must say. So that's very good. Yeah, I think so. Still, so thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you.